guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we will take a look at some new revenge content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Easy Pickings. Years ago, I worked as a truck driver, even owned my own trucks for a while. One of the companies I used to trip leased to have several different divisions. Called them up one day to see if they had freight. Was told they couldn't load me till I talked to Joe, not his real name. Joe was in charge of safety, which includes driver records. Little background on Joe is in Butthole. He played favorites to the guys who worked out of the same terminal as he did. He and I went round and round a few times. Backstory. I called him up and he won't tell me anything on the phone. Says I have to come see him in person and they can't load me till I do. I blew him off since I had about 15 other companies I was trip leasing to at the time. Fast forward a week. I happened to be in the area on personal business and I stop in to see him. He is especially nice, which should have tipped me off that something was up. He keeps me waiting about 20 minutes, finally get to talk to him. Tells me he can't load me because my license was under suspension. Tell him I'll take care of it. Go out, get in the car, and just as I leave the property, I get pulled over. The bastard set me up. That was why he kept me waiting 20 minutes. Gave the state police time to get there. They arrested me and took me to jail on a Friday evening. Didn't get to see the magistrate till Monday. Paid my fines, paid my reinstatement fees, and went on my way. Now I realize that it was my fault for not paying the fine. To be honest, I got 3 tickets that day. When I mailed them in 2 weeks later, I missed one of them. At that time, I was working pretty much 7 days a week. All my mail, not that there was much of it, was going to my brother's house. My brother failed to let me know he had mail there from the state. Joe could have simply told me about it, so I could have taken care of it. But no, the sucker got me arrested. I sat on this for 8 or 9 years. One day I'm out in the truck and see one of their trucks from Joe's terminal. I get on the CB radio and call out to him. Me, hey ABC Trucking, you got your radio on? ABC, go ahead. Me, does Joe still work there? ABC, yeah he does. Why? Me, that a hole ducked me a while back. Tell him I haven't forgotten about him. ABC, no crap. What did he do now? Me, can't tell you. It could possibly reveal my identity. But you tell that bastard I know where he lives. I know where his wife shops. I know where his daughters go to college. I'd even know where they sleep at night. Tell him he ducked with the wrong person. ABC, I'll pass it on. I kept this routine up every time I saw one of their trucks. About the 4th one I ran into told me Joe was shitting his pants. Had pulled his girls out of college. Wouldn't let them or his wife go anywhere without an escort. Was driving different vehicles to work. Made his wife change her shopping habits all the time. I pretty much completely disrupted their lives. Next truck I saw, I told him to tell Joe that having his wife and daughters escorted around wasn't going to help him. Pretty much I kept him running scared on and off for 2 years or so. I always took information one driver would give me and use it in my next conversation with another driver. So Joe thought someone was always watching him, even though I hadn't seen him since the day he got me arrested. I did find out that he became less of an a-hole after that. Next one is titled, Don't Block My Car In. My wife and I live in an old Victorian-style house in a college town split into 2 apartments. Our 2-bedroom downstairs and a 4-bedroom upstairs. The first year, it was occupied by nursing students who were great. They all finished their rotations and moved out, and we got a set of MBA students who were douches. At first we thought, oh, they're young. We'll politely complain when they don't clean up their dog crap / have a Tuesday night kegger play CODs so loud it rattles our windows. They'll figure it out and it will be okay. Well, it wasn't. Their response to our requests were annoyance and non-compliance, which opened the door up for me to engage as passive, aggressive revenge tactics, and I have many stories from the year they resided above us. One Monday morning after a pretty raging party upstairs, I came outside to find my car parked in by the upstairs neighbor my wife had nicknamed Calhammer, CH for short. Now in the lease, we had exclusive use of the driveway. Upstairs were supposed to park on the street. However, they often parked behind us when street parking was scarce. So I knocked on the door to get them to move the car so I could go to work. Only there's a problem. CH has left that morning on spring break vacation. He won't be back for 2 weeks. After I had recovered from contemplating exactly how much of a syphilis-ridden wanksock of a human being you would have to be to illegally park in your downstairs neighbor and then leave for 2 weeks, I rang the non-emergency police line and explained my situation. They tried to contact CH to no avail, so my legal recourse was to have the car towed to a legal, vacant spot on the street at my own expense, which, given I had to go to work, was what I would have to do. While I was waiting for the tow truck, I hatched a mature and a juvenile revenge plan. Juvenile plan first, I got a bottle of DOT 3 brake fluid and a rag out, and utilizing the extent of my artistic abilities, painted a big old cock and balls on the hood, with a pew 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 of pee going over the roof, and left it to bake in. The mature part of the plan came to fruition when the tow truck arrived. Our city has a penchant for street sweeping, and tow cars enthusiastically when doing so. They had just put up signs down one side of our street, notifying that they would be sweeping in 4 days. I reserved a spot that side of the road for CH car, and had the driver put it there. I let him in on the plan, as he was contracted to tow cars for the city that day. He giggled a lot at my slowly emerging cockballs artwork, and said he'd try and pick up CH car early, knowing that if he was away for 2 weeks, his company would be able to rack up a nice storage fee. The date came, and the tow driver who moved the car came straight to CH car and towed it. I had dropped a note in CH letterbox explaining, without being rude, that he had parked me in, and I had to have his car moved, at my expense so I could go to work. Human coming back and furiously pounding on my door. "Where's my ducking car?" he demanded. I explained I had moved it to the other side of the street, into a legal car space, because neither the police or I could contact him. The city had swept the street last Thursday. They had towed it. He'd need to call the city. He stormed off, furious, only to return a few hours later. Apparently the combination of the city's fine, the tow fee and 10 days storage totaled over $1,000, and his car had been, hilariously, vandalized at the tow yard. He demanded I pay. I politely declined, suggesting that he might try small claims court if he could demonstrate I'd done anything I was liable for. He never took me up on the offer. The artwork had come out great. The car had been left in the rain, so the giant dick on the hood of his beat-up Civic had rusted in. Apparently it even earned him the nickname Dick Wheels in class. Next one is titled, My Father's Revenge Against the Neighborhood Punks. This story is a little old, taking place around 2000 or so. Anyways, during that summer, there was a rash of punks who would go and vandalize houses, cars, and pretty much anything else they could do to raise hell. It was so bad that they would keep stealing the hubcaps off of my father's Grand National, as well as try and get in to steal the radios and change. He was forced to keep it unlocked as it was cheaper than them breaking the windows. The police would always take their sweet time getting here. It would take 20 minutes or more to send one officer here, even though I could walk to the station in that amount of time. By then they kids would have run off and gotten away. My father is an engineer by trade and decided to get back at them, as right after he replaced the hubcaps, they would be there that night to take them. My father went to the hardware store and bought some wires, razor blades, and grabbed a few car batteries he had in the garage. What he did was truly diabolical. He took a little glue and on the inside of the door handles, secured razor blades to cut anyone who attempted to open the door. Next, he stripped some of the wires he got and wrapped them around the hubcaps, making sure they were pressed tight against them. He took another wire and used a little tape and glue to have the wire hovering over the wires so that if someone were to grab them, it would complete the circuit and either burn or shock them. Eventually, he was able to get them all rigged before running the wire ends back to the batteries. He connected them and then went inside. That night, my father left the windows open slightly so he could listen for them. Sure enough, sometime after midnight, those little shitheads came back. But after a few yells, they seemed to leave rather quickly. The morning revealed a fair amount of blood around the handle, which then trailed down the driveway. One of the hubcaps melted slightly from the heat of the wire, but the others were not triggered. Needless to say, they didn't seem to come back after that one. I just wish we had a security system that also had a camera so I could watch those morons get it. Last one is titled, My cousin stole loads of jewelry, so I stole his inheritance. I do not speak lawyers, so please forgive me. Backstory. 25 years ago, my aunt passed away when I was a baby, leaving my two cousins who were both in their early 20s alone to fend for themselves. My grandparents, who were very wealthy, put a clause in their will that grandkids will receive half of their share of inheritance if a parent passes before the children reach age 30, and then the other half when my grandparents eventually passed. Both my cousins received a very sizable inheritance, coupled with the money they got from selling my aunt's house. The younger of the two paid off her college loans and was able to buy property. She still lives on the same plot of land. The older sibling blew all of his money. Straight out of a book of the Bible. Within 6 years, he was back to living in a condo, working as a police officer. Everyone in our small family knew he had a substance issue, so he was barely making ends meet with his officer's salary and buying copious amounts of drugs. The next 4 years, my cousin went to rehab 3 times, sponsored by my grandparents. He sobered up after getting his girlfriend, now wife, pregnant. Absolutely wretched woman. She saw my grandparents as payday and essentially baby-trapped my cousin, thinking it was her ticket. Within 7 years, they had 3 kids, so she is locked in tight. She's a nurse, and with 3 kids around, they always needed a little boost. Guess who they would always ask? You got it, my grandparents. Being the kind spirits they are, they always lend a hand. My father, mother, sister, and I got sick of it very quickly. My grandmother unfortunately passed away when I was 17, leaving my grandpa as the last remaining. I was undoubtedly my grandfather's favorite among the grandkids, which left a real sore spot in the mouth of my cousin and his wife. I had 2 more years at home before college, so I lived with my grandpa to keep him company and help take care of him. My cousin and his wife hated this, so much so that whenever they came to visit and I was not home, they would send their 3 gremlins into my room to destroy it. My room had double doors, so it couldn't be locked. This was the start. The longer I lived there, the more they would mess with me. My cousin even went as far to place one of those little mechanical noise makers in the cabinet in my room, the ones that play sounds at random intervals that make you think you're insane. Thankfully, my German Shepherd would always hear it, and after a week or so she finally found it. They did this to distance me and deter me from taking care of Grandpa, so they could swoop in and be the heroes. This continued until one of the kids found my gun. By this time, I was 18 and in the possession of a firearm. I use quotations because my grandfather has guns, but cannot aim and shoot them anymore due to arthritis and nerve degeneration, so when I moved in, he placed all the weapons in my hands should the need of self-defense arise. But should he see them out for any reason other than cleaning, there would be hell to raise. Being very well trained with guns and having a sense of pride in defending my home, I took this responsibility very seriously. I always kept the handgun in a locked container in my nightstand, with the key on a high shelf out of reach from the gremlins. One fateful day, I'm out getting my grandfather food when I come home, and my older cousin, his wife, and my grandfather are staring at a gun on the table. It was my gun that I kept in the lockbox. It was loaded and had a bullet chambered. I always keep a magazine in the lockbox, but never loaded into the gun. The lockbox was nowhere to be seen. My cousin claimed one of the children found the gun and was playing with it. I was 100% certain that he either found the key or broke the lockbox open to get to it and load it, as a 6-year-old would not be able to reach a key I could barely grab, figure out what it was to, load my gun, and chamber it. I tried my best to explain what my cousin had said was bullcrap, and that I never keep my firearms loaded in the house, but my cousin, who is a cop, scolded me on gun safety and threatened to have me arrested if I didn't leave, and hadn't arrested me yet because we're family. I was asked to collect my belongings and go back to my parents. My cousin had won, or so he thought. The next day, I apologized to Grandpa and explained to him there was no way one of the kids could have gotten the key. He agreed with me and he apologized, but he thought it best I move out until things cool down, but once they do, I would be welcome back home. Our relationship was a little fractured due to disinformation provided by my cousin. A month later, my grandfather died of a heart attack at 86. I was devastated. I was just beginning to get back into rhythm with him and rebuilding the trust that was somewhat shattered. To this day, I am still unsure of what kind of man he saw me as due to my cousin. Immediately, my cousin and his wife began sucking up to my dad. As they had sealed payday with Grandpa, it was time to move on to the uncle. This persisted for a month or 2. I wouldn't stand for it. Then came time for the will. My grandfather's lawyer read out the will to me, my father, mother, and sister in our home. Our 2 cousins would be briefed individually on their share of the estate, per my grandparents' requests. Then the miracle line in the will comes to fruition. If anyone attempts to claim any part of the estate that is not assigned to them, they forfeit any assets they are supposed to receive and will be divided equally among the remaining family members. This was basically their way of saying, if you try to claim more than you're given, you get nothing. My father is supposed to receive every piece of physical property. Aside from 2 or 3 items, he set aside for me, from my grandparents, as he is the only remaining child. The revenge. I hatched my plan. I called my cousin and told him all of Grandma's jewelry was to be donated to a charity auction. Grandma's collection of gems and metals was extensive to say the least, so a charity event wouldn't care if a few pieces did make it right. It was a lure of gargantuan proportions that my greedy bastard of a cousin could not resist. He bit right on it and headed over to my grandparents' house as soon as possible, determined to snatch up as much as he could. A handful would send his kids to college. Regardless of what I said, the jewelry was never going to go to him anyways, so his actions were purely his own since none of it was destined to be his. Coincidentally, Dad was on his way with the lawyer to my grandparents' house to overlook everything, formality stuff. According to my dad's testimony, my cousin had 3 shoeboxes worth of Grandma and Grandpa's jewelry piled on the kitchen counter ready for loading into his car. My dad and the lawyer stood in the kitchen wondering why it was all there when my cousin walks in from my grandparents' bedroom with a 4th and final shoebox. The jig was up and he put 2 and 2 together that I set him up, which was true. But there was no penalty against me for exploiting my cousin's greed, so he would duck himself over. It's worth noting that between the 18 years from my aunt's death and my grandpa's death, their wealth had increased several times over, so my cousin felt cheated and expected to receive just as much as my sister and I, despite receiving half of his already and blowing it. Throughout this whole ordeal, his younger sister, my other cousin, has not had a problem at all and is still weeping over Grandpa's death like the rest of us. However, just like that, my cousin lost enough money in the course of 30 minutes that made him contemplate his sanity. Over greed. My cousin's witch of a wife apparently filed for divorce a few weeks later. We haven't heard from him in nearly 6 years, as he is all but disgraced now. You can call this a fairy tale ending, and on this particular part of the story it somewhat is. There was a massive lawsuit by an unknown family member involving the IRS and FBI later on. But honestly, I would rather have my grandparents. Leave comments if you want the other part of the story, but it's not really a revenge story. Thanks for listening.